Disc Priests are just better, right? I mean, think about it, you can give shields to players, effectively increasing their maximum HP so that they can't get one-shot. Moreover, shielding players helps you prepare for damage before it happens, in contrast to all of the other healers who basically need to react to damage after the fact. No wonder then that Disc Priests absolutely dominate this expansion. It would seem that they just have an inherent advantage embedded in their toolkit. But it was not always so. In this video we'll use data to take a trip back in time and determine a ranking of the historically most powerful healers. A brief remark about the data used. What I did was purchase a premium subscription from Radar.io and filtering for spec representation in as close as I could get to the highest 200,000 keys completed in each season. This means that the data shows spec representation not in the absolute highest, but definitely in very high keys. If you want, pause the video now and leave a comment with your prediction of which healers you think have had on average the highest representation in Mythic Plus. Let's start then by looking at Discipline Priest. Our journey begins in Season 3 of BFA. As you can see from the representation data, Disc Priests have had it quite rough back in the day. If anything, the chart makes you kind of feel bad for them, as they never saw any significant representation throughout all of BFA and Shadowlands, and really got only moderately popular during Dragonflight Season 3. However, their power absolutely exploded in the War Within, producing the longest lasting reign of dominance an individual healer has ever seen. Let's see if the recent nerfs announced for Season 3 will be enough to put a dent in its dominion. Next, we look at Resto Druids. Personally, some of my most vivid World of Warcraft memories stem from mid-BFA, where I was absolutely grinding out Titanforged loot with my Fury Warrior, scowling at the dominance of Resto Druids and especially Rogues. Since then, Resto Druids have been anchored in my mind as healing powerhouses, Blizzard's secret love child, next to mages of course. And indeed, Druids have seen their fair share of good days, especially in BFA and also during Dragonflight, before their representation fell off a cliff in the War Within. To be fair though, almost all other healers also walked off that same cliff. Surely though, the mighty Mistweaver Monk would not be tricked into stumbling foolishly down a rock and toward their own demise. And they don't. Monks don't fall off a cliff because in order to fall off one you must first be able to climb to the top. Yet monks never really managed to do that. Their representation numbers start out in the single digits in BFA and then plummet to even smaller single digits throughout Shadowlands and early Dragonflight. Then they were allowed to have a good time once in Dragonflight Season 3 before falling back into obsolescence. However, as a silver lining, their 4.7% representation in the War Within Season 1 is actually one of their better results, so go monks, I suppose. Now, before looking at the data, I would have guessed that the historical representation of holy priests would be quite low. But it would seem that I made my assumptions without considering the absolutely atrocious healer balance during Shadowlands, where holy priest representation exploded to over 40% for 2 seasons in a row, giving their average representation numbers a solid boost. During that time, I was playing my Zag Fury Warrior and braindead DPS don't care about which healer is healing or how. So please excuse my ignorance about why the different peaks have occurred. If you guys can provide some insight into what happened to all of the healers during their peaks and troughs, please feel free to let everyone know in the comments. After their brief moment in the sun though, Holy Priests too fell back into nothingness, with the War Within demarcating an absolute low point for them. Speaking of low points, let's look at Preservation Evokers. I mean, they didn't exist for half the period we're looking at, but surely being a new spec and all, their representation would be quite high. And indeed, there was some moderate buzz around Preservation Evokers in their very first season, mainly due to their high damage and them being a new class. But they were quickly forgotten, even during their own expansion, and then nearly completely disappeared in the War Within. Maybe the changes coming in Season 3 can help Preservation Evokers, because they damn well need some help. Okay, 5 down, 2 to go. Holy Paladins surprised me, perhaps because I never see any of them around nowadays. Their overall representation has actually been quite solid, and one of the most stable ones too. According to the data, the spec was viable for high keys in at least 5 seasons, which is tied with Resto Druid. However, it's also been quite a while since Paladins have had their glory days. Nowadays they just spam Word of Glory, and it barely heals anything. And last but not least, Resto Shamans feature the most stable representation chart out of all of the healers, being viable throughout all of Shadowlands and parts of Dragonflight, and also being the only healer in the War Within that can at least somewhat hold a candle to the reign of Oracle Discipline Priests. However, Shamans have also never had a really crazy breakout moment where their power was so oppressive that no other healers could realistically be played. Okay, these were all the healers, and here is their combined chart. Taking a broader perspective on healer balance, we can see that it has never really been as bad as during the War Within, where virtually all healers except for Disc Priest and perhaps Shaman have completely gone the way of the dodo. Only BFA Season 3 and Dragonflight Season 2 feature similarly oppressive distributions, but Dragonflight redeems itself by also featuring the most balanced healer representation numbers with multiple competitive healers during Season 1 and Season 3. And now for the big reveal, the Cumulative Chart, adding up average representation numbers to see which healer has historically been the most powerful. Druid starts off very strong with dominant seasons in BFA. Paladin inches closer during early Shadowlands but doesn't quite manage to take the lead, then being overtaken by Shaman, who also narrowly misses snatching the lead from Druid. Then Paladin's huge power spike in Dragonflight Season 2 momentarily puts them at the top, but Druid reclaims its title shortly after. Then, in the War Within, Disc Priests burst onto the scene out of nowhere with the strongest power growth across all healers in the chart, but narrowly missing out on overtaking the three leaders. At number 1, Druid features a representation average of 22.9%, Holy Pally comes in second at 19.07%, and Shaman claims third place with 19.04%. However, perhaps Shaman is the true winner here because its power has been very consistent, featuring a 10% or higher average representation in 8 out of the 12 seasons. Preservation Evoker and Mistweaver Monk duke it out to avoid last place, with Mistweaver coming out on top at 5.64% over Preservation's 5.6%. Before you grill me in the comments, of course there are other equally as viable ways of looking at the data that might yield somewhat different results, but I wanted to provide a neat little overview of something that I've always been curious about. Sorry for not commenting too much on the different spikes, but I really don't know all that much about them and don't want to talk about things of which I'm ignorant. If you want to see more healer comparisons, check out my healer difficulty ranking next. If you liked the video, like it, and if you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and see ya.